I am here with Trevor Denning, and we are going to be talking about For Love of the Game, which is Sam Raimi's 1999 baseball drama. And I just kind of wanted to do an easy to do podcast on a movie. Both me and Trevor have seen recently. He is actually one of the most supportive people I've come across on Twitter. He always allows me to express myself. He always, you know, he doesn't always agree with me. We actually are at odds more times than not.
It's
So
true.
go ahead and introduce yourself, Trevor. He's a good friend of mine online.
Yeah, I am a film major who hasn't seen most of the movies that everyone expects a film major to have seen. Um, and so this year I'm really trying to focus on chipping away at some of those essentials, some of those classics, but then also sprinkling in things like For Love of the Game, which apparently most people hated. Um, but yeah, trying to get a little space from the Fast and the Furious and the Marvel movies that I loved for a long time that are starting to lose their luster for me. So
Yeah, and I mean, I think I've just been a general fan of movies all of my life, and one of the things that I've always tried to connect to is sports and movies. Those are my two big passions. And growing up, I loved watching baseball. I grew up during like the home run chase with Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa, and I mean, I personally loved it when, of course, it was at its most like corrupt. But at least at the time, it was a lot of fun, and there was this tendency for these magical moments to happen during a game. And I don't know that movies have done that well necessarily. I mean, baseball has been around for 100 years, but like what comes to mind for me is like A League of Their Own or Field of Dreams or even Bull Durham and Kevin Costner, basically. And so Kevin Costner here again, late '90s, he's playing this starting pitcher who spent his entire career with the Detroit Tigers, and he's in the midst of there you go, local team. But no, he's spent 19 years with one team, and that kind of embodies the American traditionalism and American pastime with baseball, that identity. And in the midst of this perfect game, he's kind of going through his entire romantic struggle with Kelly Preston, and what the movie I think does really well is it builds this incredible atmosphere of the stadium, the fans. I think that it shows the camaraderie that you could have with each other over a 160 game season. So I think it does things like show Costner's backstory really well. It's the romantic stuff that kind of gets shoved in there that feels a little ham-fisted, but just kind of wanted to get your general thoughts on it. I know you watched it just before I did the other day.
yeah, and this was my first time watching it. And I'll be honest, I have not seen Bull Durham. I have not seen Field of
Oh,
Dreams.
okay.
So I guess I'm starting at the bottom of the barrel. But I saw that it was going to be leaving, what was it, HBO, Stars. It was going to be leaving Stars soon. And I was watching it with my mom. My mom is very particular about movies.
Yeah.
She turned off the Tom Hanks Mr. Rogers movie like 5 minutes in.
Oh,
She's like,
wow.
yeah, I don't like that kind of movie.
Okay.
Okay. But yeah, she sat through this one and I really enjoyed it. I'm not a sports guy.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of baseball, and sometimes I'll put it on as background noise while I'm doing something else, like reading a book.
Yeah.
But two things really appealed to me about this one. One of them being Sam Raimi, who is from Michigan, directing, and that's very different from what you'd expect from Raimi, who's known for his low budget horror movies or Spider-Man, what have you. And then the other thing that appealed to me was just all of the nostalgia that goes in with baseball and '90s movies in general, and
Mm-hmm.
this one came out in 1999,
Yep.
I believe. So, I mean, right before Hollywood's big shift. I mean, I said on Twitter, they don't make movies like this anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that you brought that shift up because there's this underlying. I love movies that have an underlying subtext, even if it's not necessarily done that well. I think that while it's certainly talking about baseball and the end of Billy Chapel's career, it's also kind of this thing about movies where 1999 was a great year. It really is. Like, a lot of people, especially in our generation, look back and say that was an incredible year. A lot of really good movies came out. But if you think about it in terms of like the broad scope of everything, it was sort of when things were over, or at least like getting to that point of being over. And so it was the and Vin Scully, who was the Dodgers announcer before he retired, narrates this game, being in the booth, and it's really beautifully done. And he says that about like Billy Chapel trying to push the sun back into the sky for one more day, kind of thing. And I love that because that's what it reminds me of, is like, not Sam Raimi necessarily, because he's not from. Well, I guess he is from them because Evil Dead came out in the '70s, um, but those directors that come from that period of when the dreamers were the ones in control, at least in the new Hollywood of the '70s, and it feels a little bit like that subtext of, you know, maybe movies aren't what they used to be, but we can still make something worthwhile. We can still entertain people. We can still keep people in their seats. So I thought that there was a little bit of subtext with that as well. I don't know if you saw that or not, but
That isn't really something that had crossed my mind, but um, being that Raimi was and still is, a Hollywood insider, if there was a shift on the horizon, he certainly would have been attuned to that.
mm-hmm.
And also, Costner being at a stage in his career where things were a little iffy. He had some big successes. He'd had some duds. He was getting a little old to still be the leading man, and all of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with this movie and the control that he wanted.
Yeah.
There was a lot going on behind the scenes that I'm sure influenced production and the tone of the film.
Yeah, I think that this wasn't a personal passion project for Sam Raimi. This was a studio job. It's like, hey, can you fill in? Can you do this? Can you make sure we? I mean, I don't know. I don't know necessarily what they wanted him to do, because other than shoot the script, because the budget was $80 million, and I'm sure a lot of it was about the on-location shooting at Yankee Stadium. But I considering his career, Darkman, Army of Darkness, even A Simple Plan is just like, you don't really expect him to step in and do like a baseball drama with Kevin Costner. So I definitely think with what you're saying about Costner and behind the scenes and how much, I definitely think that it was a weird movie because when it came out, again, there was a lot of competition for it, in that year, and they didn't seem like the execution was on the same page with kind of the green light, because you have all this great baseball stuff, but I don't know how you feel about it, but the romantic stuff just didn't work for me. It felt really perfunctory.
It was interesting because I went to Amazon and was looking at reviews of the book, and something that came up over and over again was the book doesn't have that heavy romantic story. So if it feels shoehorned in, it kind of was.
Yeah, I figured.
And so I'm kind of intrigued to read the book, but at any rate, yeah, it sounds like that was forced in after the fact. It wasn't part of the organic essence of the film.
Yeah, because it's 135 minutes, and you think that, I don't know, I was thinking this could have been a 90-minute, or I'm not 90, but like a 110 minute movie with just a focus on Costner. And I mean, you don't I get at the time, you're trying to get that romantic comedy crowd in or romantic drama crowd in. You have the romance, you have the sports movie. It's $80 million. You need to make money back on it. I get it. Like I get what they
Gotta
what.
get women in the seats. Gotta get the ladies there.
Yes, yes. I mean, and I don't know. That's fine. It's almost like a Jerry Maguire model, but you don't have like Cameron. That was Cameron Crowe's movie that he put together and eventually directed and saw from start to finish. Whereas again, this is just, it felt like, okay, we have this idea that seems like it could work, but we need to shoehorn in this love story. And so I have nothing against Kelly Preston, but her performance always felt a little forced. And in all honesty, I've seen the movie like 6 or 7 times. So it's like, okay, you've watched it too much.
As soon as it was over with, though, I was thinking, yeah, this is a movie that I would definitely put on again. I don't know that I would watch it as closely as I did this first time.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a movie that if I still had cable and was flipping through channels, I would stop on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I do. I really like I like the ending. I like that, like his one teammate makes a mistake, and he kind of makes it kind of a half-hearted joke about, hey, I might end up on SportsCenter, and he's basically like, well, don't let them make fun of you, like don't, and keep your head up, and then he comes back and basically saves a home run towards the end of the game, and it's like, honestly, I cried at that moment because it was so moving to me, because it was just like, I watch all these movies as sort of about like when things not working out, or like tragedies, or like Chinatown is my favorite one of my favorite movies, and that's sort of my philosophy on life and what I sort of expect. And when a movie engages with me on like a humanistic level and it's not overly cheesy, I actually like feeling genuinely moved. It just doesn't happen that often, and for a movie like this, where it's like, for me, it might be like 3.5 out of 5, where it's flawed and it's like half of a movie, but the good parts still kind of like save it. So
yeah, it's definitely a moment of redemption for that character. He was humiliated in that previous game, and Chapel takes a moment to build him up and set up that moment of redemption, and then we get to see it paid off in a real, true way, and that's just a beautiful thing. Yeah. Redemption is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm, personally speaking, I'm not very religious. I grew up Lutheran, and it's just something I don't want to say I've avoided it, but the more I've opened myself up to just accepting like things as like, it only occurred to me a few years ago, like, oh, Western civilization, yeah, the entire thing is based on this story. There's a reason why they call it the greatest story ever told. There's a reason why, and so these redemptive arcs, these arcs of holding each other up, supporting one another, like, and then they'll be there to support you, having faith, that kind of stuff, is very moving, done well, and done in an appropriate setting. Not to get off topic or anything, and I might talk about this sometime later, but Zack Snyder's Justice League was very New Testament, very for me. So I really got a big kick out of that. So
yeah, I think what you're getting at is, even if someone doesn't ascribe to a particular religion or theology, at our very core, we are spiritual beings. Yeah. And so there are moments in a well-told story that reach us on that plane, and that goes beyond simple emotion, or a visceral reaction, but something like forgiveness or redemption touches us on a spiritual level, regardless of what we believe.
Yeah, I just before I pivot to the next topic here, I do want to say I think you really will like Field of Dreams. It's one of those movies I've seen probably over 20 times, um, but it's for all the issues that For Love of the Game had. I really feel like Field of Dreams is a complete movie, and it's a total fantasy, but it's really really good. So I highly recommend it. I just wanted to talk about Sharon Stone. She was in the news this week, kind of talking about her working relationships. I guess she has a book coming out, and she was talking about how Sam Raimi. They didn't want to hire Sam Raimi for The Quick and the Dead in 19. I guess this was 1994. And I mean, I guess I can understand it. He's coming off of Darkman and Army of Darkness, so he's not necessarily like a big studio, big budget kind of guy. But they were just like, okay, whatever, because she was the producer on it. And so and it's just so interesting to me because Raimi kind of worked up slowly and just kind of took these jobs, and then he got the Spider-Man franchise in the early 2000s. So it's very interesting to me where it's like to see where he started doing these small budget Evil Dead movies. By the way, I contend that the first one is a straight up horror movie. Now maybe it's because I haven't seen it since I was like 10 or 12 or something. But the second one is definitely funnier, is definitely comedic. And then Army of Darkness is just like crazy, like comedy. But anyway, so, I mean, kind of looking at Sam Raimi's career, what is your takeaway? I mean, are you generally a fan of him?
So I came to Sam Raimi by way of Bruce Campbell. One year for Christmas, my mom got me If Chins Could Kill.
Okay.
And I had just had surgery that Christmas, so I was pretty much stuck in bed or on the couch for 2 weeks with Bruce Campbell's memoir, and it was fantastic. So it was fun to learn about Sam and how this small group of guys in the Detroit suburbs built their film careers and so forth. And I agree with you. The first Evil Dead, which I've probably seen more times than I have Evil Dead 2. Yeah, that's a straight up horror movie. And what surprised me about The Quick and the Dead was that it's still very clearly a Sam Raimi film. I mean, even Spider-Man 2, there's a scene with in the operating theater with Dr. Octopus that's pure horror. I mean, there's those little Sam Raimi touches, and if I didn't know that For Love of the Game was a Sam Raimi movie, I would have assumed that it was, just some journeyman director, like Ron Howard or, well,
yeah,
maybe someone not on Howard's level, but, a step down from Ron Howard.
Yeah, someone kind of not giving their personal touch behind the camera, that kind of thing.
Right, someone who shows up and shoots what's on the page.
Yeah.
And like I said, even The Quick and the Dead has its moments where you go, oh yeah, this is from the Evil Dead guy.
Yeah. So
and there was none of that here, and it kind of surprised me.
Yeah, and I mean, I do like how how they integrated the sort of collage of the TV broadcast with being at the stadium, with kind of Billy being on the mound and from the dugout. Like, you can tell how they used to use money, how they, how to really create something for the audience in that atmosphere. And I do love that. I think it's criminal that they don't shoot on location anymore, because I mean, I miss things, it's like you can tell that's New York, or you can tell that's Chicago, or wherever. And to some degree they still do that, but usually it's a really expensive kind of, big budget tentpole kind of thing. So, all right. Well, I mean, I'm good to kind of wrap up if you had any other thoughts. I mean, again, I like the movie more than it probably deserves, but, Kevin Costner kind of being the sturdy, upstanding, redemptive, baseball player. That's kind of hard to go wrong with. So it ended up winning me over.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's definitely a movie that I will watch again. not because it's a great film, but because it, you know, stirs up great emotion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you for your time, and you have a good weekend. And I'd love to have you back on if you ever get the chance.
Yeah, and maybe one of these days we'll try that podcast idea I pitched to you a while back, where we force each other to watch movies we would otherwise avoid.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely open for it. So we'll see you online. Okay.